Welcome to the Road to Redemption Podcast. Welcome to the Road to Redemption Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the Road to Redemption Podcast. I am, as always, your host, Cam Williamson. Today, for the first time in the first 3 episodes, we're actually doing guests. Today I have with me Taylor Gentry and Tyler Gentry. They will both get their respective introductions here in just a moment. But I want to start off by thanking the sponsors of this podcast, Seaside Coffee Company, where customer service and quality are never an afterthought. And Ambition Threads Company, where faith, hard work, and perseverance makes for a motivational lifestyle brand. And Drahoon's Feature of Fright, which is a podcast you can find on the Apple iTunes Store. Let's get into it. We will start with Mr. Taylor Gentry, who is the writer and director of Drahoon's Feature of Fright. He has been doing his own media-based company for quite a while, but I'm going to let him talk to you about that. Taylor, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Cam.
Absolutely.
So, gosh, where do I start? It's hard to pin down what exactly I do. So I always like to tell folks that I'm a storyteller. And I know that Tyler gives me a whole lot of flack for saying that because he always asks me, oh, so you're some wizard with a long gray beard who sits on a stump and tells children wondrous folk tales. But no. Well, I guess maybe that's what I am in my head. But I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, of course. I have years of experience in filmmaking, in podcasting, screenwriting, podcast writing, theater, you name it. I've pretty much been around for a while. I created the character Count Drahoon about 10 years ago or so. At first, it started out as a film character, and then it sort of evolved into this, I guess the best way to describe him is sort of a horror host kind of character. And I basically built up a mythology around him and several different stories that are connected to him and different kinds of horror stories. And I felt like the best way to tell those stories was through podcasting. So I started the Count Drahoon's Feature of Fright podcast about 3 years ago. And it was part of a network that I had started called camcordertv.com. It was a multimedia platform network. I'm actually phasing that out now, and I'm focusing 100% on Count Drahoon. And so, yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. Hope I didn't take too long.
No, absolutely. So we're going to have, with the Road to Redemption podcast, we have absolutely no time restraints. It's mainly just, usually myself, but now just the three of us kind of hanging out. So I'm going to dig deeper into each one of you guys. I want to start with Count Drahoon, the motivation behind that. You're a horror, kind of an old school horror movie buff. What made you, and guys, you're going to find, though they're twin brothers, very different personalities, very different styles, very different interests. So I'm going to dig deeper into that. What started that? What started the love for old school horror movie films?
Well, the earliest memory I have, I was 4 years old. It was 1997. During that time, for whatever reason, there was a huge revival in the classic monsters, particularly those from Universal Studios. Turner Classic Movies at the time had just gotten started. It was running all these old films. I think it was also playing the Hammer horror films, but that's a whole separate boat. But anyway, also at the time, Burger King had these toys in their Happy Meals. It was Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I remember being very fascinated by the images of these creatures, particularly Dracula. I can't explain why, but for whatever reason, I've always had a fascination with people in capes. Batman.
Sounds a bit weird.
It is really weird. Batman was my favorite superhero. Star Wars was big back then, too, because that's when they did the re-release for the original trilogy. Darth Vader was always my favorite character. So Dracula seemed to, I guess, the next logical conclusion in this weird cape enthusiasm. So I basically from that point, I went down that rabbit hole because these were movies that my dad grew up on too.
Yeah.
So he sat me down when I was a little kid, and we started watching these movies years and years and years later. I didn't actually watch Dracula until I was 8 years old. And I don't like saying this because I know it sounds so pretentious, but the truth of the matter is watching that movie changed my life. It made me want to pursue a career in acting and just the arts in general because I wanted to be like Bela Lugosi, and who wouldn't?
You watched it all
The time. Yeah, it's pretty sad, actually. I could probably quote the entire movie.
There's not a lot of lines in that movie.
No, there's not. There's not, actually.
So, Tyler, you remember that then? You remember
It seemed like every day you would walk by the TV. I mean, I was a kid that, like you said, we're very different anyway, so I was outside all the time, and every time I'd come inside, there would he be in this dude in some cape, and I'm like, what is this nerd of a brother of mine doing?
There's actually a funny story about that. So I'm actually really close friends with my former second grade teacher. She actually was a big inspiration in my life because she was the one that actually got me into drama and pushed me to pursue that career. She always likes to tell this story. I always used to like to sit by her during recess, and we talked for a minute. And one day I went up to her, I said, and I talked really weird when I was 8, by the way. I still do. I said, "Miss Pearson, I love Tyler, but he's very odd." And that night at the school we went to, there was this big Halloween celebration called Harvest Festival. So she was working one of the booths, and she was telling one of her coworkers this story, and of course they were all laughing. Well, then like 2 minutes later, here come the Gentrys down by her pavilion, and we're both there. Now Tyler is dressed pretty normally, football jersey.
I've never really been big on Halloween, which is another weird
Right.
thing. He's this horror guy, and I've never dressed up for Halloween or anything.
So he's just casual, himself. And then there's me. I'm in a full Bible man costume.
I remember Bible Man.
Right. I do too.
So I guess what I also want to talk about, because as I have no problem calling it exactly what it is, as a fan of the Count Drahoon feature of Fright, I love it.
Thanks.
Dig into Count Drahoon. Who is he? What makes him what he is? You get to sit down in the same area as him. You get to make all this come to life for him. What makes his essence? What is he?
I just think the Count is such a strange enigma because he has been alive for so long. He's just always been sort of in the background of history and of culture, and I think telling stories and being the center of attention, being the life of the party, has always been his strongest suit. His strong suit. Being scary, not so much, because he is very old-fashioned. Back in the 30s and 40s, he probably would have been terrifying, but nowadays he's not quite as terrifying, maybe to little kids and old people, but that's about it. And that's a stretch. If I'm lucky. But the Count recognizes that he is talented in other areas, so he likes to use those talents to present good stories to people. And those stories vary. Sometimes the stories we have on Count Drahoon are really, really funny. They're just straight up comedies. Some are really dark and kind of disturbing. I've told some really dark stories.
Which is an amazing mix, which I can tell you for myself personally makes it such an amazing podcast, because you really don't know what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. From one episode to the next, and Tyler and I talked about it a lot in the beginning when I first found out about it. I would text him, "Dude, did you hear your own brother's last podcast?" Because back in that time, I was driving an hour and a half to and from Murfreesboro, which is where we're currently hosting this podcast. And you would listen to this, and I would literally, her name was Sarah, and all the different ones.
Oh, her name was Mercy.
Mm-hmm. You get lost.
And you get lost in these stories, and there was a particular point, I'm not going to spoil anything, but she screams. And it's literally hair standing up on the back of your neck, and the talent that you have on this podcast is just unreal. And Count Drahoon itself does such an amazing job at telling these stories. Where do you find the I guess basis for these stories? Is it from old horror movies? Is it from your own creation?
I try to be as original as possible. For that particular story, and I'm glad you brought that up because I wrote that. Her name was Mercy. At the time, I was going through a really tough time. There was a girl that I was deeply infatuated with, and things did not go the way that I wanted them to go, and I was really down about it, and I felt like I was grieving that I'd lost a friend. So I used all of the emotions and the angst that whole debacle caused me, and I just turned it into a ghost story. And I use that a lot. I use my own personal emotions as fodder for the tales that you hear on Count Drahoon.
It's crazy. We've never done this before. This is like, it's such an interesting dynamic. We've never dove in on each.
Have I not told you this before?
No, you have.
Okay.
It's almost as if I'm getting an outsider's perspective. It's just kind of crazy. But so essentially, it's more or less you're writing your country song. I mean, you're
kind of, yeah. That's I love to think of it that way actually, because I love music.
Right.
I'm not talented in music, but this is kind of my songwriting.
But yeah, essentially it's
because you do
that's the same process. I've written, I used to write a little bit of songs here and there and play a little guitar, and I would write songs after I would get heartbroken or after I'd do this or that. It's essentially the same thing.
And one thing I'll say, and this is something I've noticed talking to different horror fans and listening to the folks that the Count interviews. To me, horror is in the eye of the beholder.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I look at horror in two ways. They're dark fairy tales, which essentially that's what they are. And that's another thing. Growing up, I always loved to hear fairy tales. Rapunzel, Cinderella, and all that. And if you think about it, the old school horror stories, they take place in castles. There's fair maidens, there's beasts, there's Prince Charmings to save the day. There's all of that. It's just, it tends to have a darker undertone. So it's that way, and it's also, to me, it's what I find terrifying. To me, monsters, goblins, and ghosts are really cool.
Yeah.
They're not really scary, but they're fascinating. What terrifies me is the idea of losing somebody you love, or whether that's them passing away or the dissolvement of a relationship. That to me, that's the fear of being alone, the fear of the unknown, what's going to happen to you afterwards. That's the most terrifying thing in the world to me. So I try to use my personal fears, but I use them in a way that is I guess fun. That's analogous. So I turn grief and pain into monsters,
which comes across extremely clearly, which is also an amazing transition into one that I absolutely have to talk about, which is A Rose for Amelia.
Oh yeah,
deals with a lot of loss.
Yes.
Deals with. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, and guys, if you have not, definitely go subscribe to Count Drahoon's Feature of Fright and listen to all of the stories. The one we're talking about right now is A Rose for Amelia. It deals with a father and the loss, a loss that a father endures. That's where I'll leave it at for that one. Does that come from the same type of motivation?
Kind of. So there's actually... There's two things that inspired me to write that, and I won't exactly explain how it's worked into the story, but it is a vampire story, which is odd because the show is hosted by a vampire. I've actually done very few vampire stories, so
no, and I want to make that very clear, just so that that way it comes across on the podcast, guys. You're not going to hear a whole lot of Frankenstein's, mummies, and these are real people experiencing real things in these stories. Now, they're not true stories. They're not based on true stories unless, I think, stated otherwise, if that's ever the case. But from what I've heard to this point, that has not been the case. These are entirely created stories that are acted out by friends of yours and yourself and things like that. And they're just bone-chillingly emotionally attaching
I
stories.
listened to Meet Hank. I listened to it.
That's
all
where
the
we're
time.
going next.
That
Yeah.
one is like it brings me to tears every time I hear
Well,
it. It's amazing.
But real quick about Rose Familia. So it's a vampire story. In old Eastern European folklore, of course, you could probably imagine, like in Romania, Bulgaria, they've had vampire stories for forever. Yeah. And a lot of times in their folklore, their stories deal with the idea of somebody becoming a vampire, them coming back from the dead, and going back to their families and turning their families into vampires one by one until the entire family. Don't say that.
No, I'm kidding.
I was wondering how his reaction to that one was going to be, whether
No.
we were going to get mass offense out of that one.
So
accomplished,
it's mission accomplished there. So it's that aspect, and then our best friend, we had a best friend named Casey who passed away. He was really young. He was 19. I kind of wrote that story from the perspective of his parents. Because
Did you know this, Tyler?
I gathered it. I mean, usually anything it's weird, but like we're twins, so we have that thing that whatever they call that. I don't
Is that
know
a
if
real thing?
it's a real thing. It is. It's a real thing.
You put stuff like that together. I see them all. I mean, I see them every day. So you could guide it, know for sure, but it doesn't surprise me.
But in the beginning, it was really they took. I mean, and obviously they would, but they weren't dealing with it fantastically. So I wanted to tell the story of a couple that lost their child at a pretty young age and never dealt with it. They just sort of kicked the can down the road, and because of that, as hard as it was, they never tried to live their lives, and they ruined their lives because they spent over 40 years grieving over the loss of their child. So
You're talking about A Rose for Amelia now. That's the synopsis of that story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and obviously nowadays, they're dealing with that a lot better. But it's also a cautionary tale. And granted, I mean, I only looked at it from an outsider's perspective, but grief can kill you.
Oh, easily, yeah.
And it can destroy you. It can destroy your lives. It can make you do horrible things if you let it. And it's important that, as hard as it is to lose the people that you love, you do have to have some semblance of, like this podcast, of, a road to recovery, a road to redemption. Because if you don't, then you're not really doing your loved ones any favors. You're kind of letting them down in the process.
I think that's like, as a fan of it as well, like that's my favorite part of what he does. How he tells the stories is they're so relatable. Like from the outside looking in, it's so far fetched and so just out of the norm. But when you really listen to him, like you're saying, you became a fan because you're like, it's bone. I mean, there's stuff on there that's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. It's so relatable. To me, that's what the best part is. That Meet Hank one is those stories happen. Like you hear of those stories happening. That's what makes it so relatable. It's incredible.
And we're going to touch on Meet Hank for just a second because it is such. I mean, I'm going to be a broken record on this, but it is such an amazing story. But when it comes to, like you were saying, where I mean, your own twin brother is a massive fan. People who know you are massive fans, but I think it's easy to say. You forget who's making this when you're listening to it.
Oh, yeah.
You have no idea that the person who I'm even sitting in the room with now, you're like, oh, yeah, you lose the fact that it's him and that it's his stories.
I forget it sometimes, just talking about it nonchalantly. It's because it's the same thing that we do. You kind of talk to people and, yeah, he wrote all that. And people are like, who? That guy? The weird kid that just laughed with us?
Yeah, the weird kid who just laughed.
Like, he just wrote all that? And you're like, yeah.
Orchestrated it all completely.
Yeah. Oh, and it's
Well, I can't say that I orchestrated it all because I've been blessed to work with so many talented people. And I write most of the episodes. I don't write every episode.
Okay.
So, I do get contributions from fellow writers, good friends of mine who tell amazing stories themselves. The voice talent that I have to work with,
amazing.
I really am blessed because they are. Yeah, he was
No,
well.
I'm kidding.
He did play a police.
He
officer
did play
in
a.
Meet Hank.
He had like 3 lines
Three
in Meet
lines.
Hank, so which it's only a 20-minute episode, so that's a pretty big supporting role.
Your ratios are good.
Right. So, but I have been blessed. I work with a lot of talented voice actors. I mean, off the top of my head, the psychiatrist from Her Name Was Mercy, Leanna Chamish. She's fantastic, and she's like a real deal actress. She's a paid working actress. I work with her as much as I can. I have to be very selective with her though. I have to give her the script first because she, in a lot of ways, she is doing this pro bono. So whenever she, I have to make sure that what I'm sending her is like top notch, right out of the ballpark. So I try to send her the best I can. Also, my friends Charles Schroeds, Austin Duke, Andrew Gately, Yancey Pearson, just to name a few. They're all fantastic, and I mean they're not just my voice actors I collaborate with. They're also very dear friends of mine. So. And of course, my sound mixer, Aaron Trimble, is probably the hardest working man I know because he is a genius.
Does a phenomenal job.
He is and I can't. That man knows more about sound and sound mixing than I could ever possibly hope to learn in a lifetime. Just how he works and he is every bit as a perfectionist of what we do, that on his end of sound mixing, he's every bit of much of a perfectionist as I am a storyteller. So he is fantastic.
And it comes together as an absolute amazing podcast, and stories all across the board. So definitely, guys, check out Count Drahoon's Feature of Fright. Taylor, tell them a little bit about the live show. We're going to touch on it again. Tell them what it is, what they can expect, and then at the very end, where they can find you.
All right. So I am doing a live show in Smyrna, Tennessee, at this cool little place called Carpe Cafe. The Count will be there. It's our first ever live show. So basically the way that it works, I don't know if y'all have ever seen a radio play, like a theatrical play, but instead of like actors doing movements and all that, it's like them sitting there and reading the script over a microphone. So that's essentially what you're getting with this show. And we're going to be performing at Carpe Cafe July the 13th at 7 p.m. Very proud to say we actually have some sponsors for the event. We've got Performance Studios in Nashville. They're sponsoring us. Also Z's Comic Lair in Murfreesboro, and Frozen Treats from Mars as well are all sponsoring the event. So yes, they're pretty great.
And then to finish it off, let people know where they can find yourself, the Count, anybody else.
All right, so for right now, you can still find Count Drahoon's Feature of Fright on camcordertv.com, but like I said, we are phasing it out, so the Count is actually going to get his own website very soon. But you can listen to me on iTunes. Just go to your iTunes search bar, type in Count Drahoon's Feature of Fright, and you should. I'm literally the only podcast with that title, of course. Yes, I guarantee it, 1,000%. And subscribe to me that way. I'm also on YouTube. I actually put the episodes on YouTube. So again, just type in Count Drahoon. You should be able to find it pretty easily. And you can also give us a like on Facebook. And the Count is also on Instagram and Twitter, handle at Count Drahoon, all one word. He's very tech savvy for a 1,000-year-old vampire. It's pretty awesome.
It's definitely impressive for sure. And also, tell them a little bit, how many episodes are there? There's a few short films on the YouTube channel.
Oh, God. Yeah. So one of the origin stories of Count Drahoon, Revenge of the Monsters of Ansingville, is on that same YouTube channel. If you want to type that into the search bar too, and I can send you a link too if you want to put it up there.
Put that in the description box below.
Yeah, and then and then I also this is kind of related, I guess. On our YouTube page, I like to have clips of that week's episode. I put it on the Facebook so that it lures people in who've never listened to the show before. So
absolutely. And then final question for yourself, or if you need to bring the count in, that's perfectly fine too. If you had your way, very end goal, what is it? What is it for yourself or for the count?
Okay, well,
End goal.
The end goal right now, what I'm looking at is I'm trying to the count is trying to conquer the world of podcasting. That is first and foremost the step one. From that point, me personally, I would like to use Count Drahoon's feature of Fright as a stepping stone to start a new network. Me and my close friends Austin Duke, Zach King, and Braden Buck, we've all talked about starting a new network, but more branded around us, and kind of what we find interesting. I mean, we're really funny, all four of us together.
We are so different.
So
I envy their friendship. They are literally of the funniest people, and most of the stuff I have no idea. Most people don't even know what they're talking about, but it is the funniest. It's hilarious.
Our group chats are pretty funny, but we've talked about restarting a new network because Camcorder TV was a learning experience. I learned what to do, what not to do. I think going forward, this new proposed network is going to be a lot better. I think the content will be better, but we're working on that organically. We're not just going to rush into it and just go out there and do it, because I think that's kind of what hindered Camcorder TV going out of the gate. Was just we thought that we thought more about quantity and not quality. So I definitely want to put an emphasis on quality so that we can have something going forward that we know people are really going to dig. So that's basically where I'm heading, and hopefully whatever we start, to be really cliche, will be revolutionary.
So you would like to stay in the podcast realm? That's
right. I would, and I would also like to branch back into making films again, making webisodes and all that good stuff. The reason why I stopped doing that so much was, I got burned out, first of all. Sure. And also because I just, at present, I don't have the resources to make the kinds of movies I want to make. And I'm hoping that by going this independent, multimedia internet route, eventually we'll build up an audience to where, we have enough resources to where we can make the movies we want to make again. But I feel like at this point, if I just went ahead and did it, I would be doing my audience a disservice. I feel like it would be cheap and it wouldn't be great, and I want to make great stuff.
I think a table full of content creators can absolutely understand and respect that. That's for sure. Well, dude, we're gonna keep it plugging here, and I'm sure you're gonna have an amazing insight on Mr. Tyler Gentry, who is in his life. You guys being twin brothers, he's gotten to razz you a little bit during this. So now, Tyler. Now people are familiar with Tyler on the Instagram channel and on the YouTube. He's been on there pretty frequently. But Tyler, tell people about yourself. What's up, buddy?
First of all, thank you, Ken.
Of course.
Camo, Father Ken. I'm
the only thing I take issue with is just some of the slang that he uses just drives me up the wall for some reason. It's like killing it and dude AF. It's like just talk like a person. Just get up there and be like, you know what, Ambition Threads is doing exceptionally well, and
it is not dope AF.
It is not dope AF. It is quite stupendous, I might add. So no, don't do that because you'll actually lose followers.
Kill the essence of the brand.
Like Buzz Killington over here.
It's not the brand if I talk about that.
Right.
So let's talk about it. I've heard you say 1,000 times probably, and us walking around trying to spread the brand to people, trying to do a lot of things. You've always kind of mentioned that you were a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Talk about that a little bit. What experiences have you had motivational speaking?
Man, I like we touched on earlier, we lost our best friend in 2013, and you realize when you get to a low point in your life, it was kind of like a domino effect. A couple things happened, he passed away, and then, this and this happened, and you kind of reach a low. And, man, I started going to church and really getting in the Word, and started listening to motivational. I listened to a lot of, like, Inky Johnson and Eric Thomas and people like that. And I don't know, it seemed like they all kind of do the same thing. So I wanted to take those messages and kind of correlate it to my life and just kind of go for it. It's kind of the mantra with everything I do. I just kind of, emulate and not imitate. It's more or less like I grab a few things from here and there and then, turn it into my own. So,
which is, I think, massive. As you know me and you know my story, is I've always done the same thing. And I think when you come from a place of a rock bottom is kind of, Taylor talked on too, is when you're coming from a place of low, and for him, his podcast is his creative channel to get that stuff out.
Right.
Same thing for you.
Yeah, it pretty much, yeah.
And it's easy to first dive into, and I know he said it jokingly, but when you first get into the realm of, hey, I'm gonna be a self-learner, I'm gonna pick myself up. There's all these quotes, killing it, crushing it, just do it. It's all these
oh yeah,
100%.
I hear it every day.
All these corny cliches, and like with Eric Thomas and all them.
But they all stand true, man.
They do.
That's the thing is.
It's the foundation.
It is. It starts, and that's where I try to tell most people, it's hearing those cliche things all the time of, if it happens like, it's everything happens for a reason and all that. Like all those things, the reason they're so routine to our lives is because they're absolutely true. That's everything does happen for a reason, and if it is meant to be, it will be. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I just tried to take those, and I still use those phrases. Time and time again, but it's more or less making it your own. That's kind of what I wanted to do with it.
Which is exactly the spin we're going to go. So for Taylor, his spin is his podcast and his creative storytelling. That's how he makes it his own. I can clearly say I've never seen an outlet like that, where you can take a story from personal experience and turn it into that. How would you say you do that?
Along the same lines, I guess. We were kind of very. He was at least trying to be quiet. That was nice of him. Along the same lines, I think we were kind of, our parents, although they're both very different, they kind of instilled creativity in us. So I was a motocross racer and did those things and took the athlete route. I raced motocross for, good God, I think 20 years. I started when I was 3. And in between racing, I would do BMX racing, I would do baseball, I would do...
He was always doing something.
I have a form of ADD.
And it was kind of infuriating in a lot of ways. Because you just, seriously, almost everything that he picked up, he was really good at. Like baseball, golf. He was a really good golf. I know, we've kind of been, made the fake golf commentator jokes. But he really was. He was excellent at golf.
I don't know where the Lord gave it to me, man. I don't know where it came from.
I'm lucky to get out of bed in one piece.
I was going to ask, do you have any athletic capabilities?
No, not at all.
I think one of his comedy routines should be him shooting a basketball or something.
Attempting to shoot a basketball, not actually doing it.
But no, so I've always took the athletic route, and I was always very, I want to say not odd or anything like that, but I was always very different and conscious of style, and so I would express myself in that way. Even now, I get made fun of all the time for wearing too tight of pants or house slippers or
cardigans.
I love a cardigan.
Yeah,
what is wrong with you people?
Anyway, it's so I would express myself in that way, and that correlated to the dirt biker, which I at a young age I got called Paris Hilton because of the outfit changes I would go through.
I don't remember Paris Hilton, but I do remember the outfit changes.
It
was pretty ridiculous.
You race, 6 and 7 hours in a day, and I'm probably going through 2 or 3 things of gear just because I want to be fresh. And looking back on that,
I do understand that though.
Well, looking back on it, it's more or less, it's the look good, you feel good thing. You know, if you feel like you look good, you're going to perform well.
And it's intimidating to other people too.
Well, that too.
It's like you're not going to it's the idea of, no matter how many quote unquote bloody battles I go through, like I'm coming out fresh, and you can't take me down.
Right,
So
exactly. So it's yeah, man. It started out with expressing myself in style, and like I said before, I dabbled in music. I think Taylor remembers I tried to be a rapper at one
yeah,
point.
Mr. Franchise over here.
Yeah,
Not me.
I'm very passionate about music and just being creative in general. So, yeah, I would say it's a lot of the similar traits. It's just that we channel it a little bit differently. I think the one thing that you'll notice that we have in common is that we both we have a fixation of being perfectionists, and also a fixation on creating something from idea to paper to the movement. I mean,
I think the older we get, the more we realize that we're not really that different. I mean, we have different taste preferences, but we have a lot of the same values. We have a lot of the same traits.
Different outlets, but same characteristics.
Right. We definitely have the same characteristics.
Right. And so, I mean, yeah, essentially it's pretty much the same thing. We were pretty much raised on that, man. We're just creative dudes, I guess. He's a little more obviously creative in his own right, but yeah.
No, I think you're very, very creative. I think
It's just different.
yeah, we just do different things.
But that's how we.
But thank God we have somebody in the family that's good at like making clothes. Seriously, because I would be a wreck. More than I already am when it comes to fashion, but
especially because he's wearing
because right now I'm wearing a bright orange shirt.
A vampire suck shirt. What? And honestly,
that fits with what he does.
It does, 100%. But actually, in the light of it,
because if I walked up and Taylor was wearing like a Nike hoodie, I'd be disappointed.
Yeah, it'd be like, who are you?
I would have been disappointed. I would have been like, I need something.
It's off-brand.
Right.
It's off-brand. Another thing and how we kind of channel is we're funny, man. Like I don't like to speak too arrogantly on myself or be a boaster, but you get we have an older brother. We're funny.
I was gonna say you paused for a minute. It almost sounded like you forgot his name. Yeah, we have an older brother. His name's Bill.
It's George.
It's Georgie, maybe.
No, but we I think we express a little bit of creativity and just humor in general. As far as that, it's our grandfathers always told us since we were a kid, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it. You're just not doing it right.
And just to sort of further this point, years ago, I dated a girl who literally had 11 brothers and sisters. And at the end of one of my plays, like me, Tyler, and Drew, all three of us were like bunched into a corner, and we were just like making jokes, laughing, and we were on. We just kept going and going. She came up to me after they left. She's like, "You do realize you were louder than all of my siblings combined, right?"
I could totally see
That's how we roll, baby.
It's just three of us. But.
I could absolutely see that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit, and this is going to go in hand with the Road to Redemption podcast, the topic of what the name of the podcast is, but a little bit of what we touched on for Taylor too is what is the driving factor? What takes it from being your guys' best friend? That's the unfortunate passing at a young age. Where did that shift come from? Motocross athlete style to okay, I'm at this low point.
Right.
I have all this stuff that I'm dealing with. What made you go, okay, I'm done being upset about this now. Not that you're ever not upset about it.
Right.
I'm done living here. I want to go here.
Man, to be honest with you, so we'll backtrack a little bit. I'll go through a little bit of the story. We kind of grew up a little bit different. As far as like us as a family grew up a little different, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate. But our parents really never really got along. They were kind of stuff like that. So at a young age, noticing that there's a little bit of uncertainty, and then they ended up splitting when we were 11, 13, something like that. I don't remember when we were younger, and.
Well, they officially divorced when we were in high school.
Right.
But there were problems
right.
that were very visible when we were like 12, 13.
So around that time, and Taylor can vouch for me. I was a shithead, pardon my French. I just
he was a dick.
I was just, and looking back on it now, the older I get, the more, I'm not gonna say I'm wise, but wiser.
I absolutely love the man you are now compared to where you were. Seriously, and you've always been my best friend.
Right.
Like you were, but there was a time in our lives where
we were.
I was just like, I was thinking in the back of my head, what the hell is this guy's deal?
Oh, honestly, if the passing of Casey, if it didn't happen, I would be probably in jail or dead
or he would have killed me.
Right.
Would you say that that's because of the passing of Casey, or just immaturity, still learning how to get through life?
Well, the immaturity started because it was a rebellion thing. Just growing up, I never...
That stage of life.
Right. It was just, I was this 13-year-old kid that thought he would... I raced dirt bikes too, and in that sport, you have to be mentally headstrong. So I would let that carry over into baseball in the backyard, or eating dinner with my brothers and being like, dude, F you, man, I'm freaking, I'm 12 years old, I'm 30 years old in a 12-year-old body.
And in high school, he was the man. Like, he really was.
I wouldn't go say it.
No, you were. You were the guy in high school. All of the men who, were something where we grew up in, they looked up to him, and all of the, I guess, some of the not so cool folk despised him. And all the girls wanted to be with him. All of the girls wanted to be with him.
We lived in a small town.
We did. We lived in a really small town. And I hung out with him a lot back in high school, mostly because it sounds a lot worse than what I mean it to sound, but I hung out with him a lot because of protection. I felt like since he was my brother, he was the guy, nobody was going to mess with me in high school, and nobody did.
I would say, did that work?
It did, but there was, it wasn't the smoothest.
It's funny that you say that, because we all three of us brothers went to the same high school.
Mm-hmm.
And my freshman year, our older brother, see, Taylor and I are twins. Taylor was held back because of a misdiagnosis of some dumbass teacher.
I couldn't color in the lines.
Still can't.
Still can't.
But Taylor was held back a year. So when I was a freshman, my older brother was a senior. And it was crazy that I remember this moment so vividly, but it was just, when I got to high school, things started to turn. I was more or less I got a little more confident. I got a little more stylish. I really started honing in on the way I could talk to people, and I noticed that I could manipulate by using my words and the way I am. And the first day of high school, I had a weightlifting class with my older brother, and Drew at the time was playing football, and people knew him. He just wasn't. He's always been kind of standoffish, and that's just kind of how he is. He's never really been a people person. He's kind of, if you've ever met my dad, he's kind of the same as my dad. And I'll never forget, my brother had gone downstairs to get a hoodie or something, and I was still upstairs, and I'm being myself. I know 0 people in this school, and I'm cutting up and laughing and making fun of people's shirts and just being myself. And a captain of the football team said, you better be careful and watch yourself around here. He said that you're going to grow up and get your shit beat like your brother. And I was like, does my brother get his shit beat? I was like, he's never told me about getting beat up. What the heck is that? And that right there, I was just like, okay, I'm either going to have to, nut up, or I'm going to become somebody else. So I laughed it off and kind of used that. And then, like I said, growing up, man, I was always rebelling against my parents. I never really liked when they would tell me what to do. And my dad, who's an amazing dude, because he beat me up for a reason, because I needed it. But
and I always got flack from him because I never got in trouble, but I wasn't a dick.
Right, I was just a dickhead. But my dad would always, he would yell, and he was my riding coach and my mechanic when we were racing.
Oh, good times.
And he was constantly on me about just, you need to do this better, and then, as a young teenager or whatever, you got somebody telling you need to do better, you're automatically like, oh, I suck, I'm not good at anything, and blah, blah, blah. And now looking back on it, that's what drives me still. But going from there, I was just rebellious, man. I was an asshole to everyone, and it just kept going on to there. And then, March 16th, 2013, I was on the way to the dirt bike track getting ready to train, and Casey was already there, and I
Mar-
had just gotten off
March
the phone.
8th.
No, 13.
No,
Or he passed on the
no,
13th.
he was in the hospital for
Right.
7 days.
I was on my way to the dirt bike track, and I called him, and it was a normal day, and as I'm driving to the track, life light flies over, and I'm like, that's weird. This is a one stoplight town in bum Egypt. What is that? And it ended up they landed there, picked him up. We drove, and 7 days later, he ended up passing away. In those 7 days, it was just, on my way to rock bottom. Then 2 a.m. one morning, Dad comes in and is like, "Hey, he didn't make it." And I'm like, "You're a lying sack of shit."
So if you don't care,
No, yeah.
what happened?
He there's a lot of different speculation because no one was there, which was
He was riding on his.
he was
own.
by himself. The
Who
track.
caught life light?
Well, the track is at one of my best friend's house. It's
Okay.
in his front yard.
Gotcha.
We've ridden there for
For a long time.
16 years, I think, something like that. And his parents are always there. They usually kind of just kick it in the house. They're workers, so they're inside working or outside working in the back or whatever. And they were there. They just weren't paying attention at the time.
Sure.
And we're unsure. It had rained a couple days before. The track was dry, but there were wet spots. Pretty much, it slid out from under him going into a turn, and just the way he hit his head was just, perfect.
So it was a head.
It was
Yeah.
severe trauma to the head. I think he was wearing a helmet that was too big, one size too big for him. I still have that helmet, but yeah, I think it was just one size too big, and plus, man, it was his time.
Sure.
It was, maybe that was for me to straighten up, because I'm telling you, dude, I was a gnarly kid. I was a dickhead. I'll say it again, but yeah, that just it was hard, man. And then that happened. Parents had been split up for a bit, and we kind of just I kept moving and I kept going through life, and ended up going to graduate, or I had graduated by then. I was in college, and that kind of transitioned into me not wanting to do college anymore. I didn't know what I was going to do. My whole life I was going to be a motocross racer.
Did you put the bike up for a while?
No, I rode the next day.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in if it scares you, you need to tackle it. So I knew that the longer I had waited off the bike, I would have, it killed my best friend. I'm not gonna, the longer I had waited, it would have ruined me. So I ended up, long story short, I ended up quitting school, and that's a good story in itself. But yeah, I came home and I told my dad, I was like, man, I'm not doing this whole school thing. This is ridiculous. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do something different. And he was like, well, it's time for you to get a job. So I got.
How long ago would you say that was?
Oh man, 2014 probably.
13, 14.
13, 14-ish.
4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago. And dude, I was so fresh. I think that was going into my second semester of college, so I was like fresh into college. And I was stupid because the GI Bill, Dad gave that to us, and I was getting paid to go to school, and I was like, this is stupid. Well, looking back on that, I'm like, you idiot.
Something that I think is important for people to know, they don't have as much context to you as I do, is one thing, before I even really knew who you were,
right.
Before you and I actually connected, I had always heard of either Tyler, the guy that runs Ambition, or just the guy that runs Ambition. Because I would see it. I was working at Murfreesboro, and I would see it, and I would go, what is that? And people would say, yeah, it's this guy. He started it. And
I'm sure they said
the number one thing that I always heard is, you'll know him when he's here. It's what they would always say. You'll know him. If he's here, you'll know him. You'll know who it is.
That's interesting.
And I would, how? And they'll go, well, everybody's talking to him. He's talking to somebody, or if not everybody.
Or he's talking to the wall.
Well, yeah.
And
they would say he's talking to somebody. So when I first met you, it was very clear what they meant. Right. You're one of the most confident, most assertive people into a situation that I've ever met in my life. And I've never seen somebody who will walk around a mall that they've very rarely been in and walk up to people and go, you need this.
You're like a kiosk worker, but better.
But not annoying. You don't want to punch people
right.
all the time.
And you hinted to it in the beginning, and I wanted to make sure I touched on it again because it's important. You said you found at a very young age that you could manipulate people in the way they did things with your words, not in a bad way.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to say
not in a bad way.
Yeah.
But you watched that in yourself when I watched that in you when you talk to people everywhere we go.
Right.
people have no idea who we are.
Right.
They have no idea what ambition is. They don't know who you are. But by the time they leave the booth or the mall, they're like, I've got to have that shirt.
Dude, I'll tell you, there are certain things, in my personal opinion, there's certain things you just can't teach. There's some things that some people are just born with. Like, for instance, my brother is born with a creative bone that there's not many people in this entire planet that have. That can't be duplicated.
Sure.
To me, at a very young age, and it took me a while to realize this, but at a very, very young age, our grandfather, Gene, is me on steroids when it comes to talking to people. I mean, that man.
Oh yeah, he's the best.
And sometimes I make enemies just because some people don't like that I talk so much, or some people he laughs too much, bro, or you know what I mean.
It's intimidating.
It is.
I can tell you,
and it's not even necessarily intimidating. It's more or less. It's just too much.
There's a lot of confidence in there.
Right.
That I can tell you when I first met you. Now you and I are the same, but that's why you and I click so well.
Right.
Is I will talk to anyone. I will talk about anything for as long as you'll let me.
Right.
So when you first meet you, if I didn't know you and if I wasn't the way I was, you would go, this guy
is a nut.
Well, there's just so much confidence. You are very unapologetically you. And
I try to be.
And then I ruin it when I come up to him like, hey, you got any food at the house? Or my favorite, hey, that Alfredo in the fridge, are you going to eat that? Because I'd really like it for lunch.
Well, it is a different dynamic, and I'm sure Tyler will remember this. When you and I, one of the first few conversations we had barely
That's when you had the beard.
Yeah, I had the really big one, yeah. And you had asked me to come to the Flex. You said, hey, we'll be at the Flex, stop down.
Yeah.
We'll do, that was one of the first times you and I actually talked, and you said, yeah, I think my twin brother's running around here somewhere. And I was like, I didn't even know.
You got a twin?
But I didn't really know you enough for that to be shocking that I didn't know that. But then they said, yeah, it's Taylor. He's right there. He's wearing the Ambition. You always wore that light beach hoodie.
I remember you were like looking around.
Yeah,
here.
I'm like, I don't see another Tyler. And then they go, right there. And then Taylor walks up to us. And then
I'm sure it was very underwhelming.
Yeah, well, no, it's not that, but it's... So, as much as Tyler is very unapologetically Tyler, you are very unapologetically yourself. You don't try to be Tyler.
Yeah.
You don't act like... You guys are who you are, and you seem to have found a very, very powerful sense of peace with that. That you are Tyler, you are Taylor, and those are two almost opposite people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where I want to take this now, and then we're going to come back to Ambition. You said things didn't go well between your parents. There was a lot of animosity, a lot of fighting, stuff like that. Let's go there, if you guys don't care.
Sure.
When I look at people, and when I've done this, where I talk to everybody that I can for as long as I can and really dig deep, and when I look at the things that make me who I am, I always find through massive, I don't want to say pain, but a lot of pain between your guys' best friend, watching parents fight, because I grew up that way. My parents fighting all the time, and just a very high sense of stress and anxiety.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah, toxicity.
Yeah, I couldn't say that.
In your, I thought I was going to mess it up.
Good job, guys.
Golf
What I find, and what immediately comes to my mind, is some of the funniest people, and some of the people whose just goal it is to bring happiness into others' life, are those people that know
100%.
true pain.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's correlated with you have to find that in those situations. There's two types of people. There's the people that take their negativity and surround themselves with it, or they push through it with more positivity.
Yeah.
And that's how we were raised.
Yeah,
we were raised
we would wake up at 2 a.m. to parents fighting, and then 3 days later we'd be like, yeah, if you guys keep it down, we'd be able to sleep at night. You know, we would have to laugh it off. That correlates to
even now, like our grandmother has pretty advanced stages of Alzheimer's right now. So, and we have to laugh about it, because if we don't, we'll go crazy.
Well, and you find I would say, in today's society, even just what you said, you have to laugh about stuff like that. But now in today's world, that would be so frowned upon. Oh my gosh, how could you laugh about that?
Oh yeah,
but I would say for people like us, the three of us that are sitting at this table, you understand that one, there's no ill intention in it, but if you can't laugh through life, and I'm only speaking for me, you guys can speak for you. If you don't, your risk or your chances of sliding back down that rabbit hole of holy shit. You know, I know the lows that I can go, and I don't want to go there again. So if I don't constantly either A, find some kind of humor in it, or B, find a way to constantly be lifting others up so that way I can have a sense of purpose through your creative channels, such as the podcast, such as the clothing. And the clothing is an outlet for you.
Right.
The clothing is an outlet for you to get out and reach people. That's why we do the events that we do, and you want to grow it to the spectrum that you want it to be, not because of monetary value or for people to know that Tyler Gentry is the one that has the, as people call it, the triangle logo, but it's because you want to reach people.
Right. I think that, and this is speaking for myself, I think that in those low situations, you can either, it's kind of like fire, you know, you could let it, you know, just engulf everything, or you put that fire out with water, sand, you know, there's other ways to put a fire out, and that's what we did. And those situations happen 10,000 times a day to 10,000 different people. So it's essentially, it's kind of up to me. I put it on my shoulders, and I'll give Taylor some of it too. It's up to us to put a light to that, because nowadays, as much as the political correctness goes around and stuff like that, people don't like talking about this stuff.
No.
And it happens on a daily basis, so why would we not address things like that, you know?
Well, and that's exactly why I asked the question that I did, because it's not comfortable to
No.
talk about
Nobody
parents.
parents divorcing or best friends dying, nobody likes talking about that. But if we put a light to it and more people see that, you know, well, dang, dude, he did a whole podcast and created this whole movement, and he started a clothing line, and they did this, and if they can see light coming from darkness, more people will get a flashlight. So it's more or less, I mean, speaking for myself, I wanted to laugh, man. I always tell people, the people that I mentor, if you're not on a daily basis, if you don't at least smile a couple times a day, you need to change something.
Yeah.
So, and those situations are hard, man. Losing people, I mean, I can tell you, like, it doesn't get easier. You just get a little stronger every day. It's something that you think about. But
I actually use this in a line in one of the episodes of Count Drahoon. You don't ever get over losing somebody. You don't ever get over, you know, trauma or the hurts and the pains of this world, but you get through it.
Right. Yeah.
And when you get through it, that's when you develop real strength.
Do you think you could have got through either Casey's passing, your parents' divorce, Casey's passing, your parents' divorce, and I'm pointing at each one of them, do you think you could have done that without your channels? Without your ability to take everything that you have inside of you and get it out. While giving you something to do that is creative, and it is the essence of who you are.
If I did not have the creativity that I have, probably not.
What about
I probably would have I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think we would have figured it out. I think it would have taken a lot longer. Taylor's a whole lot smarter than I am, so I think he would have found it going through college or going through.
You mean scholastically?
Well,
no, I don't know about that, because I'm definitely a lot more emotional.
Right, but
I'm very sensitive.
I think that we would have found our outlets, but I think that what made us different, and we kind of did this off of each other, not knowing what we did, but we both took the chance of creating things. I mean, we both, and not really creating things, but we both took the chance into marketing our creative things.
Would you say that was, because we're sitting here in your father's house where both of you live, correct?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that is supported by him?
By our father?
You and I have talked about ambition. You and I have never talked about the podcast. Because he's been walking around and he's tried to be quiet as we're recording this podcast.
I think you want this one?
I think our dad loves us.
Clearly.
And dad...
Is it?
Dad has been in the military almost his entire adult life, and he is, as he has put it to us, he has fought, abroad for years so that we could have the freedom to pursue what we wanted to pursue. So he basically picked up a gun to go to the wall and defend us so we wouldn't have to do that for our kids in the future.
And I think also that... Go ahead.
So I think on the one end, at least from my perspective, he wants us very much to succeed and to be happy and to do the things that we love to do. But in terms of what I'm doing, I don't think he fully understands what I'm doing.
Well, and that's what I was going to say.
And that's not I'm not, trying to talk bad about my dad.
No.
And I understand where he's coming from, because the idea of you putting something out there, like essentially what I am doing, which, let's be honest, nobody has really done. They used to do this back in the 30s and the 40s, and it went out of style because television, became very popular and people watch TV programs. So the idea of people actually, like in mass quantities, wanting to listen to a radio drama like on the internet, it's a weird concept. It's something that nobody probably would have thought of when he was his age. So
to say that nobody's doing what you're doing is a severe understatement. I mean, it's
That's, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of really good audio dramas out there, but
Well, there is. There is, but there's... I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you feel, and I just talked about it in my last podcast, that there's a sense of empathy there going, I understand that I don't understand, but you do your thing.
Right. I think that and even in this, even in the clothing or the podcasting or whatever, I think that he doesn't understand to the most part.
Sure.
At the end of the day, I'm a t-shirt salesman. Statistically, on paper, you don't do well.
Sure.
It's hard to sell a t-shirt to a guy that owns a t-shirt. So, and Taylor's he just dresses up and and talks weird, but also things like that nowadays, brand building, and Taylor essentially doing the same thing. It's new, exactly. So the way he's been raised was that
you have to go through these institutions first,
and military, they tell you pretty much it's the same thing as society. Is this is successful?
Structured.
This is successful because of this.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an A to get to B, you won't get to B. And our thing is like, well, we'll just kind of do it and see where it goes from here.
Yeah. Now clearly, I've never achieved the ranks of your father in the military, but I was in the military, and I can say
understand.
that. Yeah. One of the biggest things that caused me to do what I do now, which is, I'm an open book. I mean, you could ask me anything, and I'll tell you. And a lot of that is now because in the military you are so repressed, and you are, if you do this, you are then to do this, and there is no deviating from that.
Right.
What happened was I woke up one day and go, I don't want to do any of that.
Right.
I don't. That's not me.
Right. And that's the thing where, like earlier, I was telling you about being rebellious and stuff. It's essentially the same thing. That's where we kind of gravitate that. It's like quitting school and starting your own business. Most people wouldn't even dream of doing that. I'm not saying that I'm better or worse. I'm just saying that was what separated Taylor and I from, that's kind of what pushed us through the ceiling of getting through the divorces and all the kind of traumatic things, was that we put it out there. I learned it from him because he was an actor. So as an actor, you're putting it out there. I mean, pretty much you're putting it out there. You're on stage and you're being...
It's very vulnerable.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And, watching that, and I'm like, man, anybody can, what Taylor's doing, anyone can do in their own right. Not to his ability, but anybody can go out there and do it. And I was like, man, that's what I want to do. And it's like, you take all that repressed, creativity, and I've got all these awesome ideas. Oh, that would look cool like this, and this would be, and you channel it out.
Yeah.
And the biggest mistake that people do nowadays is they have that fire, but nothing to light it with.
Sure.
So that's our voice. That's why you do what you do. That's why we want more people to have more of a voice than what other people tell them they can, I guess is what I'm saying.
And again, I'm speaking for myself. You guys tell me what you think as well. For myself, when you were saying, nobody quite, it's very vulnerable to put yourself out there, whether it be a clothing brand, a podcast, where, like we said, it's you have a niche there that is yours. It's hard. And where you said, everybody has their thing. Yeah, they do. I think it's very difficult to go, look, this is who I am. social media makes you do that.
Right, and also, I mean, social, yeah. Well, and because we live in such a judgment zone, everybody's, back 10 years ago when Taylor said, "Yeah, I'm going to be a vampire and do a podcast," most people would be like, "That's stupid. Why would you do that?"
And I still get that. To be fair,
same to all of us. We get that,
and it's important to point out sometimes the people that love you the most can be the most detrimental
100%.
because
Scared.
yeah, they're scared. They're scared for you. They love you so much they don't want you to fail, but they don't realize that they're actually hurting you and not helping you. Because I got that my whole life. They're like, "Taylor, what you're doing is too obscure. It won't work. There's not especially people your age, they're not going to get it. They're not going to like what you're doing." And I kind of ignored them.
I can't hear you.
I can't hear you.
There's a place in that where you have to. Because as a clothing brand, and you and I talk about this all the time, as a clothing brand, as a podcast, when you're doing what you're doing, and as a social media personality, I guess is what you would call myself, is I'm just me, and I just happen to be pompous enough to think that people give a shit when I do it in front of a camera.
No, you're a fantastical master of mysticism.
Wow.
You look at
Trademark.
it, and right there, just doing those things, your scale of success is not very high.
No, not at all.
To reach that massive level, but I wake up every day going, it's gonna happen. I just don't know when.
Right. And
something is going to do it.
The things that I built the brand off of and where I got that from is what we were raised on, and I'm sure exactly what you were raised on: hard work, faith, and persistence.
Yeah.
It's staying persistent no matter what happens.
Yeah.
You can lose a best friend, you can go through divorce, alcoholism, and all the things you went through. Staying persistent and staying on path as close as you can, because your path is not going to be straight ever. And having the hard work and the faith, not only in the Lord or whoever you have your faith in, but in yourself as well, to know that you can do those things and know you can maintain hard work and maintain persistence. The thing about fear is people see fear and I always say there's two types of people in this world. People that when you get hit in the mouth, do you go home and put a Band-Aid on your mouth, or do you go and fight back? Yeah. There's two types of people. You either knock down or you get out. And fear, I think that is absolute bliss is on the other side of fear. So if we would have never taken, honestly, I'll speak this for myself, the brand is nowhere, and hasn't even scratched the surface of the itch of where I want to take this brand. But I died tomorrow, I'm successful, just because of the bliss that I get to. I get to see the best version of people. I meet incredible people like yourself. I influence Taylor on a daily basis, vice versa, him to me.
You do influence
and
me.
And it's like, I think bliss, absolute bliss, is disguised on the other side of fear. And if you stay on the left side of fear, all you're going to do is just be scared. But what people don't realize is like Will Smith said about skydiving. Like, you're scared all the way up till you get to the plane, but as soon as you jump out, it's like, oh my gosh, this is sick, right? Because like you're flying essentially. That's how you correlate things like that. So,
and just to hit on that, because I don't feel like I say this enough out loud, so I'm basically telling you right now in the world, like, Tyler is really a huge influence on my life, because I learned a lot about marketing, social media marketing from you and from you too, Cam. What to do, because I'm so old-fashioned. Sometimes it's hard for me to redirect things in a newer approach, so I kind of have to rely on you a lot to get it out there in a way that people are actually going to see things. Right. But I think you taught me probably one of the most valuable lessons in life, and I think that if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be so approachable. Because creative types sometimes can be very, they can come off kind of strange, kind of crass, and you taught me to be myself, but to be myself, to shine, to let people see the light that I have. Right. That people, that rather than, repelling people away, that they would, come to me more and more often. So I have you to thank for that.
Well, that's one of the first things when I met you that I can tell you, there's a respect in that.
Yeah.
When you walk around knowing who you are and going, yeah, I paint my face and I'm a vampire on a podcast, but that's who I am. Right. You go, respect.
Well, that's the thing is most people are scared to.
Yeah.
Because you said earlier, which I appreciate, but you said that I have that confident.
Yeah.
That it's just because I know exactly what I'm good at, what I'm bad at. I know I'm an asshole most of the time. I know when I'm cool. I know when I'm not cool. It's like, it's almost like you stand up straighter, and you almost, when you know who you are, you don't have to worry about, oh, I am this person around Cam, but when Tinder's around, I can't do that. So make sure they're not in the same room.
And and I used to be really bad about that.
Yeah, well, everybody, 100%.
I just stopped caring a long time ago.
There's a beauty in that.
There really is. It's very liberating.
That's our voice, man. Like, it. I mean, you do it. I learned that from you, and I learned that from you too. That's your voice. We're just trying to show people that we don't care. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, because I guarantee you, there's another kid out there that paints his face. It's like, I'm a weirdo. But once he hears Taylor's podcast, they're like, well, this guy's a freaking weirdo too, so we can be all weird together. It's
one big weird family.
Well, and that's the thing is, there's like, and I know you've got to go, Taylor, but like with Count Drahoon, where people say there's not many people out there like that. We don't even know that yet. There's kids. I mean, there's how many billion people in this world?
I think like 6 or 7 billion.
Apple iTunes travels the world. Mm-hmm. We don't know who's out there because you're the first one doing this.
Right.
So if we, and I know we all share this passion and belief on all of our different platforms, but if I keep putting it out there, there's gonna be people popping up going, holy crap, I didn't think there was anyone else like me out there. Same thing for the clothing brand. Now, for you and I, especially, with who you are, and I want to get back to that for sure, because I know we got to start wrapping it up here, but you and I, like, with being who you are as a person, both of you, if I come to you, and I do it all the time, and go, dude, my day is just shit. and you and I will call each other based off what we say on our Instagram platforms. I know what I'm going to get.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that it's not going to be all encouragement, and I know that you're not going to beat me into the ground, but I'm going to get both of those things both of which I need. Right. Hey man, it's going to be all right if you quit being a big baby.
Yeah.
Like,
we have that exact conversation.
Yeah, we have those conversations all the time, and that is all coming through, I think, in the brand.
Yeah.
So, back to the brand. What is the ultimate goal?
Oh, jeez. I have 2 answers for that.
Let's hear
it.
My
initial answer is that I'm going to be bigger than Nike. I want to take over the apparel game. Okay. I want to do head to toe in ambition threads.
Heard you say that multiple times.
But that's, saying things like that, most people look at you like, okay, this gets a little bit crazy. So I've backed that down a little bit. Man, I'd like to think I'm one of the first brands to stand heavily on the unique style as much as the impactful message. I love the fact that people bring their best versions to me. So in highlighting that with clothes and stories and things like that, that's the ultimate goal. So if we could do that every day, and no, it doesn't matter if you're, you love partying on the weekends. If that's the best version of you, then you need an Ambition Threads t-shirt or a hat. And if you're the best podcaster on the planet, you need to wear a hat, because that's who we are. As far as an end goal, I'm not much on making 2-year goals and 5-year goals, just because I have ADD, so I change every day. But I want to impact over 1 million people. Documented would be great.
He's getting there.
I want to, and I just want to create cool stuff, man. Like I said, I'm styled pretty uniquely. So, as you know, I go over concepts with you all the time. Yeah. Stuff changes, especially in this industry. Everything changes all the time, every moment of every day. So I just want to create. I want to keep creating the next best possible thing for you to wear and you to express exactly who you are. Because I built this brand off of the.
What the hell?
Golly, I built this. That was crazy, dude.
That scared the hell out of me. Oh, they're scared of the vacuum.
I built this brand for the 15-year-old kid walking through the hallways of Eagleville High School with no money. And,
Shout outs to Eagle.
Yeah, shout out to Eagle. But with no money and wanted to impress the girls. That was my main goal. Was like, if I could get the hottest girl in school to see that I have a nice shirt on, I'm gonna feel good about myself. That's who I'm selling to. So. Well,
and for you, I don't know if you know this or not. When I bought into Ambition after we met at the Flex, and that was our first meetup.
Right,
I guess.
right.
What I noticed is when I looked at companies like Alpha Elite and I looked at companies like whoever, Gymshark, whatever, they're all severely overpriced. We all know that.
Right.
I assumed.
But people buy it because of the feeling that they get.
Right.
Now, those messages, as you and I have talked about 1,000 times, have been so lost now. There's no message left in those companies. You and I, and I usually take a back seat when we go to these events and I just kind of watch you. I spend 98% of the time watching you listen to another person tell their story.
Oh, yeah.
And then walk away completely satisfied.
Yeah, that's
not with the material of the clothes, which they're always ridiculously over the moon about, but the person that they just connected with, and now they've bought into. This is not his brand.
Right, it's a movement.
This is now my brand.
Right.
I'm now wearing my own brand because I am Ambition.
Right. That's the best part to me is to hear those stories. Like, if I didn't know Taylor and heard his story, to me that would pay my bills if it could. But no, that's what we want to keep going with. I want to keep going with those stories and things, because that's what motivates me now more than ever. Is the more people that I can impact, they essentially impact me in a way.
So to wrap it all up, Tyler.
Okay.
Where can the people find you?
I'm on Instagram is my main platform right now. It's @_Tyler Gentry. It's TYLOR because we're twins and he's Taylor, so I would have to be Tyler. It's @_Tyler Gentry. Snapchat I'm never on, but it's Tyler Gentry 42. The brand is mainly where I want you guys to go. @Ambition Threads Co. Ambition Thread on Instagram, Ambition Threads Co. on Facebook, and I started vlogging because Cam, you got me back into vlogging.
It's a soft V.
Soft V, vlogging. But yeah, I got back into vlogging. What's it been? 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that.
Apparently, you just video yourself for an extended period of time.
Walk around the city.
So yeah, just YouTube Tyler Gentry, TYLOR Gentry GENTRY, because
he came up with that earlier this morning. He's been using it ever since. So.
And what's next for the brand?
We're gonna launch probably end of April, so a month from now. We're gonna come out with a couple new tees, couple new hats, and then events. I want more people to know our ambassadors. I want more people to know me and my message and my why, my to, and my how. So that's all but the stars. All but to the stars now.
Taylor Gentry, hit him with that Count Drahoon one more time. Tell him about the live show.
All right, live show. Count Drahoon's Feature of Fright performing
Prestige.
live
Wow.
for the first time on July the 13th, Friday the 13th at 7 p.m. at the Carpe Cafe in Smyrna, Tennessee. For more updates on the live show and the podcast in general, you can like us on Facebook, Count Drahoon's Feature of Fright, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Handle is @CountDrahoon, all one word, no caps.
Guys,
If I may,
yes.
What you're doing, incredible. I think you should interview more people, and I think that you have a natural podcast voice and a flow.
I have a voice I have a face for radio.
Yeah, you have a face for radio. That's exactly what I was about to say.
I do
No,
love the
seriously,
show. It's a really good show.
It's what people need to hear, man. Because I'm not saying my story is anything, out of
That's
the ordinary.
special. People need to hear.
But more stories like that are keep kids from killing people and doing crazy stuff, because everybody goes through everything. So this is a perfect platform for it. So I appreciate it. I think it's cool. This was the first time Taylor and I got to talk to each other like this too. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
Love it,
and
I
I really,
didn't know he liked me. I thought he hated me.
yeah, you have your moments.
I mean, they have hugged twice during this podcast, so it was definitely.
It's a
special.
beautiful
Holding hands
moment.
right now.
Yes, it's beautiful. Somebody's playing the guitar in the background, singing "Kumbaya."
Yeah,
Literally,
it's
it's
fantastic.
wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. The room smells of rich jasmine
It
and
does
lavender.
smell amazing in here, by the way. I was gonna ask what it is.
It's
Yeah.
not jasmine or lavender though.
Yeah,
I don't know what it
I think
is.
it's children tears because my father likes taking souls.
What?
Yes.
It smells amazing. in
Well,
here.
the souls smell great.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys both for being on this show. I know people are going to absolutely love it. We're going to shout this out on all the different platforms that we have. Guys, you will be doing yourself a major disservice if you don't check both of these fine individuals out. And
Yes.
we will catch up with you on the next episode of the Road to Redemption podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
We out.
We out.